Hello guys and welcome, and I'm super excited to be talking about some of the big changes that are going to be, or at least has been announced for the next patch 9.0.5. and honestly there's going to be interesting topics in this video, talking about the Valor Points, a new system that's going to be resembling PvP in PvE in terms of gearing, one of the biggest issues that Shadowlands has in my honest opinion. And then we'll talk about some of the big class changes happening, and also covenant changes that could actually shift your best covenant, or maybe put the worst covenant in line with your best covenant, and maybe you're going to be swapping covenants in the next patch. And again, patch 9.0.5 has been, or they're saying it's going to be released in March, so it's not a long time. So let's go and have a look at some of the Valor and Mythic Plus gearing changes that they have announced today. So this is a very small summary right now, as you can see. You can read the Blizzard announcement post in terms of what's going to happen, but the general consensus, I want to keep it short and short and sweet. You gain Valor Points from completing Mythic Plus dungeons and from calling. So okay, the calling thing is okay. They want you to do, you know, quests and things like that every day. So you're basically gaining Valor Points, like PvP Conquest Points if you do PvP. And we'll do comparisons for this very soon. There's a weekly cap on the amount of Valor Points you can gain or obtain. So that's very similar to Conquest Points. Again, we're not sure how this is going to work. Is this going to be something like you can gain 500 Valor Points the first week, and then the next week you can gain 1000? So there's a catch-up system for alts. We'll have to see. Valor Points can be used to upgrade any item that drops from Mythic Plus dungeons. So all of a sudden there's some juicy trinkets, especially for healers, that can drop from Mythic Plus. If you get that, you can upgrade it to higher item level loot. How high can you upgrade that piece of loot? And this is the main part. The item level ceiling you can upgrade is kind of depend on your Mythic Plus progress. So just like PvP, if you completed all Mythic Plus dungeons, you can upgrade it to 200. If you completed all Mythic Plus dungeons in plus 5, you can upgrade it to 207. If you've done it on plus 10, you can do it to 213. And if you have Shadowlands Keystone Master Season 1, which means completing every single dungeon in plus 15, you can upgrade that item to 220. So basically, it's exactly like PvP. You gain Valor Points by doing things like Mythic Plus, callings. You can use those Valor Points to upgrade certain pieces or certain items, but you can only upgrade them to a certain item level based on how good you are at Mythic Plus. The same way, if you compare it to PvP, you can see it here, the Conquest gear. If you're combatant 1400 ranking, you can upgrade it to 207. If you're challenger 1600 ranking or rating, you can do it for 213. If you're rival, so that means 1800 PvP rating, you can do it to 220. But PvP doesn't stop here. Unlike the PvE system that Blizzard is trying to introduce, if you're duelist 2100 rating, which is it's quite hard, you can upgrade items to 226. And if you're elite 2400, you can get weapons only, that are going to be item level 233. So there are already people complaining about this system. First of all, I'm going to come out and say that I really appreciate that Blizzard is acknowledging the fact that PvE gearing is an issue. And I really appreciate that Blizzard is trying to not create a new system. They're taking a PvP system that people enjoy and like and bringing it into PvE. But the fact that they stop at 220 in plus 15s is kind of saying that, I don't know, is Blizzard scared that, or do they want Mythic rating to be the best source of gear for PvE players? I'm not 100% sure, so I really want to hear your opinion about this. How do you feel about the fact that it's capped at plus 15? Like, in my opinion, should they have, like, if you complete all dungeons in plus 18, 19, or plus 20 or something, you can upgrade your gear to 226? Should that be an option? Like, it makes sense because PvP has this, why doesn't Mythic Plus have it? Overall, I'm really happy about the fact that there's going to be, again, ways of upgrading or getting better loot from Mythic Plus. The fact that, again, the way that you're going to track your progress, the game is going to check for these achievements. These achievements are account-wide, and I know people are already asking questions like, is this achievement, because it is account-wide, my alts are also going to get access to 220 gear if I do Mythic Plus or callings and gain this Valor Points? I'm assuming at this point, there's no information about this, but I'm assuming no. PvP rating is not account-wide. I'm assuming that even though this achievement is account-wide, your other alt characters are still going to require to do plus 15s. Again, this is a prediction because there's no real information about this. And also, there has been some notification about raids. People have been asking, what's going to happen to raids? Why don't we have the system to raids? And Ian has basically said, raid gearing needs help too, but the static nature of raid loot table complicates mid-tier solutions. We want to get dungeon improvements out ASAP, which is going to be around March, as we continue to discuss the right approach for other gear sources in raid and war content. So raiding might get a similar approach in the future. Before this video gets too long, I really want to hear your opinion about the Mythic Plus gearing here. Again, like I mentioned, should the skill ceiling or the item level be capped at 220 or should it go higher? Let's go and look at the balancing or class changes, because there is a lot of Covenant changes and class changes coming in 9.0.5 in Shadowlands. So first of all, let's go and have a look at Druids. So because this is a healer channel, we're going to be looking at healer changes and we're going to be predicting some of the impact that it's going to have. Again, this is very early. There's still a high possibility there's going to be more changes coming very, very soon. And I might miss out on something because it's kind of rough state right now. So Resto Druid is buff. Yeah! Resto Druid Rejuvenation heals a target for 116 instead of 104. So Rejuve is stronger. That's it. Resto Druids are the best raid healers. This is not really going to change anything in terms of their raid viability in my honest opinion. It's nice change because I do feel Resto Druids could use a bit of a HPS boost, because the fact that their utility in raids, at least in Castle Nache, wasn't all that great. What I call these pure HPS healers, these healers need to do more healing than other healers like Resto Shamans who provide a ton of utility. Is this going to change that? Not really, but I mean it's better than nothing at this point. But I do feel that Resto Druids need some utility talents or utility abilities added, maybe damage reduction or something along those points, which is probably not going to happen in 9.0.5. Maybe some big changes are going to happen in 9.1. So I'm not expecting anything major in this patch, more of like HPS fixes. And honestly, they did need a buff. In terms of Covenant abilities, and this is interesting, Blizzard has mentioned that they want to touch up Covenants and make Covenants that were not that great, make them like really underperforming Covenants and bring them in line, which might actually change your Covenant choice. And we'll talk about that, especially the Resto Shaman section. So stay tuned for the Resto Shaman. Adaptive Swarm, which is your Necrolord, Resto Druid or Druid Covenant ability, now heals for more, deals more damage, and also increases the effectiveness of periodic effects on them by 25% instead of 20%. So this is an interesting change. This is an interesting buff. I think Adaptive Swarm is quite popular to some extent in certain PvP circles as Resto Druids, but again, I don't do a lot of PvP. We'll have to see how this is going to affect. The fact that Night Fae Convoked Spirits has been across the board one of the most popular Covenant choices for Druids, not only Resto Druids. I'm not sure how this is going to affect. I haven't looked into possibly overthrowing it, but you can see that Blizzard is trying to fix it in the same way that they're trying to fix Soulbind Conduit for Ravenous Frenzy, which is part of your Ventier Resto Druid ability, which could be argued as being the second most viable option for Resto Druid. Again, a big if, because Night Fae is so dominant. Ravenous Frenzy increases your critical chance by a bigger amount per stack. So this is your potency conjure, so it makes it a bit stronger. Is this going to make it in there? Again, too early to say, but you can see that Blizzard is trying to bring them in line. So let's go to monks. And guys, Mistweavers have been fixed. Okay. Mistweavers, people have been calling for a lot of Mistweaver changes, and the main thing that people were calling for Mistweavers in terms of their performance was mana consumption. A lot of people are unhappy with mana, and Blizzard heard you. They are changing the mana or lowering the mana cost of Renewing Mist. Cost change from 2.2 of base mana to 2.1. Not huge, maybe not exactly game breaking at this point, but Vivify changes were pretty nice. Cost change from 4.1 of base mana to 3.8 of base mana. So across the board, mana cost reductions to your probably most important or most used spells, and that is Renewing Mist and Vivifies. We'll have to see how that's going to. Again, it's better than nothing at this point. Mana is a constraint. Blizzard has heard you. Is this enough? Probably not. The fact that Mistweavers are probably the least played healers by a substantial margin maybe indicates that Mistweavers need a gameplay change. Or maybe they need to be OP for one tier in order for players to flock to them and even out the player base, because Mistweavers are really severely underplayed at this point. No one is playing them compared to something like a Resto Shaman or even Priest class in general. So again, Blizzard has heard you. These are changes that people wanted. Is it going to be enough? Maybe we'll have to wait until 9.1 to see some substantial changes to Mistweavers. So now let's go and look at Paladin. And this is honestly, I completely expected this, because I do feel Paladins are going to be one of the strongest healers in next year. I'll make a video about this, because I feel when Prideful is going to be removed, you're not going to have the mana constraint, or you're not going to have the mana buff. Maybe the healing requirement is going to remove. It's all going to be based on what the next Season 2 Mythic Plus affix is going to be. But the fact that Paladins provide the most damage out there, or insane amount of damage reduction, and their healing is really kind of strong right now. I do feel Paladin is a good healer to be investing at this given point. They have nerfed him, and they nerfed him in probably the most obvious way possible. That is the Holy Shock cost change from 14% of base mana to 16%, so it costs more. The fact that Holy Paladins have mana issues or have no mana issues is kind of troublesome. Is this gonna change that? Probably not, but I think Blizzard is aware of the fact that, hey, this Paladin healer has no mana constraints in any of the PvE or PvP content. There has been PvP nerfs happened a couple of days ago with Holy Paladin mana. Is there going to be more changes happening to PvE? So that's interesting, because Blizzard is definitely aware of it. And they also changed Vanquisher's Hammer too. You can see it here. Vanquisher's Hammer is actually going to generate one holy power. So all of a sudden, again, they're trying to bring Vanquisher's Hammer and Necrolord more in line with Kyrian. At the end of the day, Kyrian is probably across the board one of the most popular choices for Holy Paladin, with, you have to remember, Ventir, Ashen Hollow being a popular option for Mythic raiding, and kind of trickling down in Mythic Plus as well. We'll have to see how that's going to impact, but again, I think Kyrian is in a pretty good spot right now. I have played Vanquisher's Hammer in beta, and I thought it was a fun ability, so we'll have to see down the line how this is going to compare with your other Covenant abilities. But honestly, I kind of like the fact that it might make a comeback or something along those lines. But I do feel that Kyrian has a lot of synergy to be thrown down at this point. So we'll have to, again, we'll see in the future. Blizzard is trying to bring Covenants in line. Let's go to Priest. And Priest ones, honestly, are really, really interesting, because I wasn't expecting this. So depending if you're playing a Priest right now, if you're playing a Discipline Priest, you're probably playing Spirit Shell in raid situations. Spirit Shell being insanely overpowered or extremely strong in raid situations, bringing you to this Fire Mage Combustion type of a healer, where you have this 1 minute window where you're ramping, using a Spirit Shell, using a Mindbender, using all of your trinkets combined, and when that's over, you're kind of just sitting there and doing nothing. Maybe you have small ramps in between with your Schism and 1 Radiance charge, because you don't want to use 2 Radiance charges. This kind of playstyle is very different from what Discipline Priest used to be. And Spirit Shell is getting nerfed. Absorb Shield for 100% or 80% of the value. So this is very interesting. Is Blizzard aware of the fact that Spirit Shell is a thing and they don't like it? And they're trying to change it? They want to bring Evangelism back into the rotation? I know a lot of Discipline Priests who love Spirit Shell, and a lot of Discipline Priests who hate Spirit Shell. Let me know how you feel about this change. Very interesting. In terms of other legendaries, again, they're buffing certain legendaries for Priests. Honestly, Priest legendaries are not all that fantastic if you really look at them. So Kiss of Death reduces the Shadow World Death's cooldown by 12 seconds instead of 8. And causes damage to trigger atonement when using a target below 20% HP. This part here, 20% HP, is the one that makes it really, really niche situation. Like, if a boss starts off at like 20% or something along those lines, I'm not sure if this is going to be really that impactful. We'll have to see later down the line. At the end of the day, this legendary was one of the most fun legendaries in beta when it didn't have this 20% kind of parameter added to it. So besides that, you'll notice that there is a lot of changes here. They're not really relevant. They are buffing Night Fae ability for Priests. So all of a sudden you'll see here, if you read the changes here, Guardian Fairy reduces damage taken by 15% instead of 10%. And at the end of one of the major changes here is that Benevolent Fairy increases the cooldown recovery rate of your target's major ability by 150% instead of 100%. So this is something that, again, Night Fae is not really popular for Priests at all, except for the fact that in MDI they might be using Night Fae for Discipline Priests, because Discipline Priests are basically a complete support class in MDI where you have to use your power infusions on your mages, and also the fact that if you have Night Fae on your Priests as well, using the cooldown recovery aspect of this Covenant is really strong, when basically most of your damage in MDI is coming from a Fire Mage, and basically you're trying to give as much of an impact to your Fire Mage as possible, meaning that in MDI, this is a popular choice. So Blizzard is trying to make this more popular choice in live servers. Again, I do feel that the whole support aspect of this Covenant is really interesting, but it requires you to be grouped with players that know what they're doing. In puck situations, that can be very hard. So again, interesting concept in terms of buffing Night Fae for Priest in general. And they also buffed a legendary Cauterizing Shadows, which was actually OP in beta. So Shadow War Pain expires on a target, 3 allies within 30 yards are healed instead of 55 to 75%. So that's also interesting. We'll have to see how that's going to deal maybe in AoE situations or ad situations. Maybe in Mythic Plus it'll be interesting. The fact that Priest legendary choices are somewhat limited in Mythic Plus, I really want this to be an option. I really want this to be an option. So we'll have to see in terms of the numbers, and we'll see in the future. But generally speaking, I think it's the right way of giving an additional legendary for Priest, because it's really weird to have PI as your main option at this given point, especially if you're poking in players are not aware that you actually placed PI on them. And Shaman, one of the most interesting changes in my opinion in terms of Covenants, and this is something that is possibly going to have some meaningful impact in terms of what Covenants you're going to be using as Restoration Shaman when 9.0.5 is coming out. So Fate Transfusion, so this is Night Fae Covenant getting buffed. Night Fae Covenant for Resto Shamans was probably the weakest. One of the biggest advantages of Night Fae Covenant was that the single target damage potential was pretty great, because it would deal the same amount of damage to, like, again, 4 enemies. But if you use it on a single target, it'll deal the same amount of damage on that single person. So priority DPS aspect of Night Fae is actually really fantastic. What they did basically is that now it deals more damage. And the most interesting part is that pressing Fate Transfusion again within 20 seconds will release 60% of the damage done, not 40, on top of the fact that it deals more damage, of all damage from Fate Transfusion, healing up to 4 allies, not near yourself, but within 20 yards. All of a sudden, this is actually becoming a viable option or something to consider, especially if you really want to bring that single target or DPS aspect in terms of your Covenant. This is very interesting. And besides this, there's a Lightning Shield changes, which again, this Primordial Wave buff here that people have been talking about, this is for enhancement only. People are not aware of the fact that, hey, your target's affected by Riptide for 150% of normal damage. Primordial Wave for Restoration Shaman, your Riptide for 60% of normal healing. That's not getting affected. Like the healing waves are going to be hitting the people with Riptide. It's only going to be 60% of normal healing, and that is not changing. Primordial Wave is not getting buffed. Is in the same spot as it was before, which is a pretty good spot, especially in raiding situations. So it's only the enhancement portion that's getting buffed, because for enhancement, Primordial Wave was a really poor option, which kind of made Shamans who wanted to play enhancement and Resto go into Ventir position, because Ventir was a very solid option for enhancement. If you wanted to play Elemental or Primordial Wave was a solid option for that as well. So Primordial Wave is not getting changed for Resto. Fate Transfusion on Night Fae is getting a pretty substantial buff, and besides that, you can't really see it here, just ignore all of this here. You'll see that Kyrian Vesper Totem is also getting a buff. So summon a totem at target location for 30 seconds. Your next 3 damaging spells or abilities will cause the totem to radiate more damage. Arcane damage up to 6 enemies near the totem, and your next 3 healing spells will heal up to 6 nearby allies of the totem for 91%. So Vesper Totem, biggest aspect or biggest kind of annoyance was that its range. It can be really awkward to make use of it in something like Mythic Plus situations, while it's very easy to make use of it in raid situations. What is going to happen to Resto Shamans? All of a sudden, the Covenant choices, especially considering Night Fae, especially considering Vesper Totem buffs, they're kind of equaling out. And all of a sudden, you might not have a clear option for all content anymore. And all of a sudden, like for example, you want to have extra mobility as a Resto Shaman. Maybe the signature ability of Covenant is going to be the defining factor. So for example, I want to have more mobility on my Resto Shaman. I'm going to go Night Fae and get Soul Shape, because Resto Shamans are relatively mobile. My Night Fae ability is going to be somewhat relatively equal in terms of HPS, but I really like that Soul Shape. Keep in mind, Fleshcraft has been buffed, now grants a much bigger shield and offers a large damage reduction during the channel. So there's going to be some interesting choices to be made between Resto Shaman in terms of Covenants. I think there's very interesting changes for certain Covenants for other healers. I think there is the mana reduction to Renewing Mist and Revivify is the right way to go. I think the Paladin, Nerfs, and Holy Shock mana cost are probably the way to go as well. Spiritual nerfs are really insanely interesting to see what's gonna happen with spiritual in the future, and the fact that they're buffing legendaries that were somewhat underperforming because discipline priest or priest in general doesn't have really strong legendaries are probably the right ways to go. How the covenant choices are going to impact. Am I gonna have to grind a new covenant for 9.0.5? That's something that kind of scares me, but also excites me with the fact that I might have to or get to choose a new covenant, or maybe all the covenants are going to be a lot more equal in terms of the HPS portion, that I get to pick covenant freely. Guys, let me know how I feel about all these changes. These are early preliminary changes. Anything can change. I might miss out on something in terms of the balancing. We will have to wait a bit more to see when the patch or the PTR servers are going to be a bit more stable, and I'll basically will try to update everyone with the changes. If you like this content, please do subscribe and like the content, like the video. It helps me to put out these videos, and I'll see you in my next guide.